And Jesus tells us, and he is here prophesying. He is prophesying, predicting, telling us the future because God is sovereign. He knows the future, and God is omniscient. He's all-knowing, including of the future. God is eternal. He is apart from time, though he works in time. Because God is unlike us, he knows the future. And here Jesus prophesies the future. On his journey toward Jerusalem, he says that he would be, number one, arrested. Number two, mocked. Number three, shamefully treated. Number four, spit upon, which was an act of great disrespect. Number five, that he would be flogged. He gives us the mode by which he would suffer. And flogging in that day, I've told you many times, but it's very important to note, and I think the movie The Passion of the Christ actually typified this graphically accurately. And that is that they would take a prisoner, strip them naked or near naked to embarrass and humiliate them. Jesus was beaten, his beard was plucked out, he was mocked, shamefully treated, falsely accused, and spat upon. Everything he predicted came to pass. And then the hands would have been affixed, possibly chained or roped together. And the man would have been tied to a whipping post, and his back and his legs and his buttocks would have been exposed. And then perhaps two soldiers, one on each side, would have something called a flagrum or a cat o' nine tails. It was a handle that had straps of leather that proceeded from it, at the end of which there would have been a bowl made out of metal or of stone to tenderize the man's flesh as you would tenderize a piece of meat. And then there were hooks, oftentimes made out of bone or metal, many of them, across each of the leather straps that would then sink into the man's flesh. And they would whip the man, tenderize the flesh. The hooks would sink deeply into the body, down into the deep tissue. And then they would literally rip the flesh off of the man's body. His heart would go into trauma. He would have significant blood loss. For Jesus, this was after a sleepless night, dehydration, the beating that he endured at the hands of a crowd who mocked him, of evil men. And Jesus at this point is a bloodied mess. History records outside of the Bible that on occasion it would be so violent that a man's rib would literally come flying off of his body. And when Jesus uses the word flogged, he knows that that is exactly what he will experience in Jerusalem. But he is a man on a mission to fulfill the scriptures, to get to Jerusalem to atone for the sin of the world by suffering at the hands of sinful men, though he himself was without sin. Jesus also says that he would be killed, that he would not swoon on the cross, that he would in fact die. And Jesus did die on the cross. He breathed his last. And to ensure that he was dead, an executioner took a spear, put it underneath the side, underneath the rib cage, so that it punctured the heart sac so that water and blood flowed from his side. Jesus was then wrapped in burial linens and spices, weighing upwards of perhaps 80 to 100 pounds, and his body was placed in a cold tomb hewn out of rock without any medical care. Friends, Jesus was killed, just like he promised. And then he prophesied and promised as well that he would resurrect, that he would be the only man to ultimately conquer, defeat death, that he would do the one thing that no man has ever done, come back from death, to never die again. To never die again. And that is because the wage for sin is death. Jesus died in our place for our sins, though he was without sin, but death could not hold him because he had no sin.